The dark side of the intuitive introvert's mind. Carl Jung's take. INTJ, INFJ. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And for intuitive introverts, that journey of self-awareness is both a gift and a burden. In the Spiritual Wisdom chapter, we delve into Carl Jung's perspective on the shadow side of the INTJ and INFJ mind, exploring why the very understanding that helps you understand the world can sometimes make it harder to live in it. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Have your deepest insights ever felt isolated or misunderstood? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story may be the mirror someone else needs to see their own truth. 1. The curse of deep insight. Introverted intuitives, especially those shaped by the psychological framework Carl Jung described, possess a rare ability to read life at a level that goes far beyond surface appearances. They can walk into a room and feel the tension before a single word is spoken, sense dishonesty wrapped in polite conversation, or detect the quiet ache someone tries to hide behind a smile. Their mind does not simply collect information. It weaves connections between events, body language, tone, and patterns of behavior, creating an almost prophetic understanding of what is truly happening and what is yet to come. This is not a skill that can be learned through study alone. It is a soul-deep perception, an inner radar tuned to frequencies most people are blind to. Yet for all its beauty and precision, this ability often feels less like a gift and more like a burden. The reason is simple. Most people do not want to be seen this clearly. They may be told they are overthinking or reading too much into things, when in reality, they are perceiving truths others are not ready to face. This rejection doesn't just sting. It teaches them that sharing what they see can disrupt relationships, provoke defensiveness, or even lead to isolation. Over time, they learn to carry their insights in silence, holding back the very perceptions that could protect or guide others. This silence is not born of apathy, but of a deep understanding that truth, in the wrong moment, can do more harm than good. And so, they become silent watchers, observing, processing, and storing what they know until the time is right, if it ever comes. This inner world can be both powerful and lonely. The intuitive introvert's mind operates like a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, gathering fragments from both worlds and shaping them into coherent meaning. But this heightened awareness is often misunderstood by those who live only at the surface. They might be labeled as overly intense, detached, or even strange, when in truth, they are simply attuned to the undercurrents of human experience. It is in these undercurrents that the soul of the intuitive lives, constantly scanning, feeling, and connecting dots that others never think to connect. The weight of this gift grows heavier when it touches matters of trust and morality. They can sense when a partner's words ring hollow, when a friend's smile hides despair, or when a workplace's values are eroding behind the scenes. This constant exposure to what lies beneath the mask forces them into a delicate dance between revealing the truth and protecting their own peace. They want to help, but they know that not every truth can be spoken without consequence. This leaves them carrying a quiet emotional load that few ever see, making their compassion deeper, but their solitude sharper. At their core, introverted intuitives are not detached cynics. They are deeply empathetic souls who long for harmony, even as their vision reveals the fractures beneath it. They hold the paradox of being both healer and silent witness, understanding that sometimes the most loving act is not to force change, but to wait for the right moment, or to guide subtly from the background. The challenge they face is learning how to bear this sight without letting it crush them, how to honor their soul's vision without burning themselves out in a world that often prefers shadows to light. And in mastering this balance, they transform their so-called curse into a quiet power that shapes their path and touches the lives of those ready to truly see. Do you feel the weight of this rare gift? If you're ready to embrace your deep insight and turn it into your greatest strength, comment below. I trust my intuition to affirm your journey. 2. Jung's discovery. Carl Jung's work revealed that you're not fabricating scenarios in your head. You're perceiving inner objects, the subtle psychological forces, buried emotions, and hidden motivations that shape people's actions beneath the surface. This rare ability allows you to sense patterns in behavior and unspoken truths long before they become obvious. Patterns Jung recognized as archetypes emerging from the collective unconscious, a shared well of symbolic knowledge humanity carries across cultures and centuries. In everyday life, this shows up when you meet someone and instantly feel drawn to them, or uneasy without a single logical reason. Your unconscious has already read the room, matched signals to timeless patterns, and delivered its verdict before you're even aware of it. In modern settings, this sensitivity is both a superpower and a burden. Picture sitting in a meeting where everyone agrees on a proposal, yet you notice the slight pause in someone's voice or the fleeting shift in their eyes. You can feel something is wrong. You voice your concern, but others dismiss it until the hidden truth emerges later, proving your instincts right all along. This is the paradox Jung described. The gift that empowers you is also the very thing that can make you feel misunderstood or alienated. Without self-awareness, it can tip into overanalysis, mistrust, or emotional exhaustion. The true mastery lies in refining this perception, learning when to trust it fully and when to anchor it in evidence. Jung emphasized that such intuition, when guided by self-knowledge and humility, becomes a force for clarity and connection rather than conflict. Your role is not to expose people recklessly, but to understand them deeply, using your insight to navigate relationships and decisions with compassion. As Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." By honoring your inner knowing while keeping it balanced with patience and discernment, you transform it from an isolating trait into a source of wisdom, one that not only protects your soul, but also enriches the lives of those around you. 3. Why it feels so real. It feels so real because your mind doesn't move through life collecting clues one by one like most people do. Instead, you are given complete, vivid images of what lies beneath the surface, as if the truth itself has chosen to reveal its face to you in a single, undeniable moment. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." For the intuitive introvert, this awakening is not a rare event, but a constant state of being, as though your soul is tuned to a deeper, unspoken frequency. You don't need proof or a trail of evidence to understand what's happening. You simply know. And that knowing arrives with a spiritual weight that others can't quite comprehend. Imagine sitting across from someone, catching the faintest shift in their tone or expression, and suddenly sensing the heartbreak they've been hiding for years. Imagine walking into a room and feeling the silent tension settle over you like a heavy mist, even though no one has said a word. These are not guesses. They are fully formed truths that appear in your mind whole and complete, and their clarity can be as overwhelming as it is powerful. This is the paradox of your gift. It grants you profound empathy, foresight, and the ability to read between the lines of human behavior. Yet it can also leave you feeling like an outsider, carrying knowledge that others would rather ignore. People may tell you you're overanalyzing or reading too much into things, but deep down, you know you're not overthinking what you're perceiving, and what you perceive is often more real than what they choose to see. Your spiritual radar is always on, tuned to signals most people will never detect, making you both a mirror and a light for those who cross your path. Yet this same depth can unsettle others because you uncover the truths they spend their lives trying to hide. It's why your perceptions feel heavier, sharper, and more certain than ordinary thoughts. They are not just mental conclusions, but soul impressions, carrying layers of meaning that reach far beyond logic. The task, then, is not to silence this gift, but to learn how to carry it with grace, to wield it with compassion, and to share it in ways that don't overwhelm, but instead awaken. For when you master this balance, you step into the highest role of the intuitive soul, not as someone who forces others to see the truth, but as someone whose very presence makes the truth impossible to ignore. Comment below, "I trust my inner vision," if you're ready to embrace the vivid truths your mind reveals and fully honor the power of your intuitive perception. 4. The hidden cost. Over-reliance on intuition may feel like a strength, but it carries a hidden cost that quietly undermines balance. When the intuitive function dominates, the inferior function, practical, sensory engagement with the real world, weakens, leaving gaps in daily life. This neglect can lead to disorganization, forgotten responsibilities, and a slow drift away from the grounding structures that keep life stable. The soul may soar in the realm of ideas and insights, yet the body lags behind, disconnected from the present moment. It's like having a compass that always points to the horizon, but forgets to show the ground beneath your feet. Carl Jung observed that when this imbalance takes root, it doesn't simply create a messy desk or a missed appointment. It creates psychological strain. Without grounding, intuition can spiral into overthinking, anxiety, and detachment from reality. The mind becomes flooded with visions, patterns, and meanings, but struggles to translate them into concrete steps. In daily life, this might look like endlessly mapping out a future plan, yet never taking the first action, or sensing the truth about someone's intentions, but forgetting to reply to their message. The visionary gift turns inward on itself, becoming more of a burden than a guide. The way back to harmony is not to suppress intuition, but to consciously strengthen the neglected sensory function. Grounding actions, cooking a meal, tending to your space, feeling the texture of fabric in your hands, or noticing the warmth of sunlight are not mundane distractions. They are anchors that pull your awareness into the present. By practicing this, you close the gap between inner vision and outer reality, allowing insight to become something that shapes the world rather than just observes it. True mastery comes when the soul's deep wisdom meets the tangible, lived world. Intuition illuminates the path ahead, but it needs the steady steps of practical action to bring its visions to life. When both work together, the inner world no longer floats above the surface. It becomes a force that reshapes the present, aligning what you see within with what you build without. 5. The danger of neglect. Carl Jung warned that when we ignore the essential aspects of life, we don't erase them. We merely push them into the unconscious, where they gather force until they explode in ways we can't control. For the intuitive introvert, this often comes from becoming so absorbed in the rich, complex world of ideas, patterns, and meaning that the demands of the practical world are left to wither in the background. You may convince yourself that mundane tasks, like paying bills, keeping medical appointments, tending to daily responsibilities, can wait because your mind is engaged with something more meaningful. But reality has no patience for delay. Over time, this neglect takes form as a gnawing undercurrent of anxiety, an obsessive preoccupation with minor health concerns, or a compulsive fixation on insignificant details perfectly aligning the books on a shelf, endlessly tweaking your workspace while the pillars of your life, like career stability or personal relationships, quietly begin to erode. I once knew a gifted INFJ whose ability to foresee the trajectory of complex projects was almost prophetic. Yet her avoidance of routine paperwork and health management slowly undermined the very stability she needed to support her brilliance. This is the shadow Jung spoke of, the neglected parts of the self returning not as harmless reminders, but as disruptive forces capable of derailing the conscious life. Neglect is not a passive absence. It is an active seedbed for problems that will eventually demand more energy to fix than they would have to prevent. In modern life, the danger is magnified by the endless pull of digital distractions. It's easy to fall into productive procrastination, where you fill your day with safe, surface-level busyness, replying to every email, scrolling for information you don't urgently need, organizing files you rarely open while sidestepping the difficult conversations, overdue commitments, or uncomfortable truths that truly matter. Each time you choose avoidance over action, you're making a withdrawal from your future well-being. The dam may look sturdy on the surface, but tiny cracks are forming beneath, and once they give way, the damage will not be subtle. This isn't about abandoning your inner life. It's a rare and powerful gift that allows you to see connections others miss. But a gift without grounding becomes a liability. To protect your clarity and peace, you must balance the abstract with the concrete, meeting life's tangible demands with the same precision you bring to your internal visions. Carl Jung believed individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self, requires us to embrace every aspect of our being, even the parts that find daily maintenance dull or unworthy of attention. Facing the world directly, addressing both the profound and the practical, frees you from the unconscious pressures that fuel anxiety, compulsions, and crises. It is in the act of integration where the visionary mind meets the grounded hands that your soul finds stability. When you give as much care to the structure of your daily life as you do to the architecture of your inner world, you create a foundation strong enough to support your deepest insights. Neglect may feel harmless in the moment, but in truth, it's a quiet architect of chaos. By confronting the small things before they grow, you safeguard your energy, your vision, and the harmony of your entire being. Stay connected with our spiritual wisdom community by subscribing today. Here, we explore the deeper layers of the soul and learn how to balance insight with the realities of life. Remember, your awareness is a gift. Nurture it, and you'll stand strong in a world that often misunderstands you. 6. The solution: integration. Instead of burying your intuitive gift or trying to force yourself into the rigid mold of pure practicality, Carl Jung offered a far more profound spiritual approach: individuation, the lifelong process of bringing all parts of the psyche into harmony. He understood that your intuition is not a flaw to suppress, but a rare instrument that, when tuned correctly, can reveal truths that others miss. Yet without balance, it can feel like a burden, pulling you away from the present moment and into an endless stream of perceptions and possibilities. Jung believed the key was to anchor this gift in the tangible world so that it could serve you rather than exhaust you. He compared the psyche to an orchestra where intuition may be the violin playing the most beautiful and haunting melody, but it will only reach its full potential when it plays in time with the grounding percussion of sensory reality, the steady rhythm of logic, and the deep bass of emotional stability. This harmony is cultivated by creating simple, repeatable systems for daily life rituals, such as morning reflection, mindful movement, or maintaining a clear and ordered environment, so that your insights are no longer fleeting flashes, but seeds that can take root and grow. Jung also emphasized the power of active imagination, a practice where you intentionally engage with the images, archetypes, and symbolic figures that emerge from your unconscious. In this dialogue, you are not passively receiving visions, but actively testing, shaping, and refining them until they reveal a truth you can apply in the real world. This is not mere daydreaming. It is a deliberate act of inner craftsmanship, forging meaning out of mystery. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Jung warned. And these words reveal why integration is essential. Without it, your inner world controls you. With it, you control the flow between your inner and outer realities. Think of it like a lighthouse. If its base is weak, the light will waver and scatter in the storm. But with a strong foundation, it becomes a fixed point of guidance, cutting through darkness with precision. By uniting your intuition with grounded presence, you transform it from an overwhelming flood into a clear stream that nourishes your choices, relationships, and sense of purpose. This is the essence of integration, turning your inner visions into living forces that move through your daily actions. So your spiritual gift becomes not a secret weight you carry, but a guiding light that shapes your path and quietly illuminates the way for others. 7. Becoming a grounded visionary. When you learn to balance your inner vision with decisive outer action, you step into the rare space of the grounded visionary, a place where your intuition is no longer a silent presence drifting in the background, but a powerful force actively shaping the world around you. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This awakening is not about chasing the illusion of perfection, but about committing to the practice of merging what you see within with what you bring to life in the outer world. It is the understanding that the soul's deep perception is only the seed, and seeds must be planted in the soil of consistent action if they are to grow into something that transforms both you and those around you. To walk this path, you must learn the rhythm of inner listening and outer doing. Like a musician who hones their skill not by hiding in a quiet room, but by stepping into the noise and uncertainty of the stage, you refine your gift through active engagement with life. You test your insights in real situations. You adjust, you recalibrate, and in doing so, you strengthen the bridge between the spiritual and the practical. This is where the shift happens. What once felt like a burden, an overwhelming flood of impressions and possibilities, becomes a focused current of creativity, influence, and healing. Instead of being trapped in the endless loops of what could be, you anchor your visions into what is, building step by step until something real, tangible, and lasting stands in front of you. This process demands patience, humility, and persistence. Mastery is never a single mountaintop moment. It is an ongoing dance between inner knowing and outer doing, between the soul's quiet whisper and the loud demands of the world. Each time you choose to act despite uncertainty, despite imperfection, you reinforce the truth that your intuitive mind is not a fragile thing to be hidden away. It is a powerful tool meant to illuminate paths, awaken others, and alter the very environment you inhabit. Through this integration, your gift stops being an isolated vision and becomes a living presence, one that inspires thought, moves hearts, and changes lives. In the end, being a grounded visionary means more than having insight. It means having the courage to embody it. You become a bridge between the invisible and the visible, a channel through which spiritual wisdom flows into the reality of daily life. And when you live this way, your presence leaves a legacy that speaks long after you are gone. A legacy built not only on what you saw, but on what you dared to bring into the world. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments and type, "I choose to be a grounded visionary," to affirm your commitment to balancing intuition with real-world action. Remember, the true power of your gift lies in consistent practice, turning what once felt like a burden into a soul-aligned force for transformation. And so, as we close this exploration of the dark side of the intuitive introvert's mind, remember that your depth of perception is not a flaw. It's a rare and powerful lens through which you see the world. Carl Jung taught us that self-awareness turns what feels like a curse into a gift. And when you learn to channel your insight with wisdom and balance, it becomes a source of strength, purpose, and connection. If you found value in this journey, please like this video, share it with others who might need to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos filled with insight, inspiration, and transformation. This is why every empath eventually snaps and becomes the shadow they feared. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. What if the empath's gentle heart, once a source of light, becomes the very doorway to a hidden shadow no one dares to speak of. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we uncover the dark truth. Carl Jung warned us about the silent breaking point of the empath and what it reveals about the deeper forces within the soul. If you've ever felt like your kindness was mistaken for weakness, or your silence was misread as peace, this message is for you. As you listen, consider how these insights apply to your own life. Have you noticed moments when your empathy turned into exhaustion? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. 1. Empaths absorb too much and forget themselves. They begin with open hearts, radiant with compassion, intuitively drawn to the unspoken wounds of others. Empaths don't just understand pain, they absorb it. They feel it in their bones, breathe it in as if it were their own, and carry it like an invisible burden. But over time, something quiet begins to unravel. As they become the emotional caretakers for everyone else, they start to lose touch with themselves. Their own needs become whispers drowned out by the louder cries around them. What begins as sacred service becomes self-abandonment. They confuse compassion with compliance, equating love with sacrifice and healing with self-neglect. And slowly, their soul begins to disappear beneath the weight of other people's chaos, until one day they can't recognize themselves in the mirror. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But empaths often live in the shadow of who others need them to be until the soul can no longer bear the dissonance. The empath breaks not out of bitterness, but from years of misalignment. This breaking is sacred. It is the moment the soul stops bleeding for what does not bleed for it. Sometimes this looks like silence, sometimes like distance, but always it is a reclaiming. The empath no longer says yes when they mean no. They stop apologizing for existing. They stop rescuing those who demand healing but resist accountability. And the most painful truth they face is that their presence had become a lifeline for people who only loved them for their ability to carry pain. When the empath awakens to this reality, the soul does not collapse. It rises. This rise is not loud. It is not explosive. It is still sovereign and spiritually anchored. The empath becomes the mirror instead of the sponge. They reflect rather than absorb. And in that reflection, they force others to confront their own shadows, often for the first time. The ones who once called them too sensitive now call them distant. The ones who relied on their emotional labor now say they've changed. And they have. Because the soul has remembered its wholeness. It no longer tolerates being fragmented just to be palatable. What once triggered deep emotion now passes through like static, not because they don't feel it, but because their nervous system has stopped being a battlefield. This is not numbness. It is clarity. It is the maturation of a soul that has walked through fire and chosen to stop setting itself ablaze for others to stay warm. They stop offering explanations. They stop negotiating their worth. They stop pouring energy into voids that never filled them. Instead, they turn inward. They rest. They heal. They choose themselves not as an act of ego, but as an act of soul preservation. For the first time, their love includes their own name. The empath who once overfunctioned now understands that boundaries are not walls, but declarations of self-respect. And what was once called breaking was actually becoming. The soul has not given up. it has come home. Have you ever lost yourself trying to care for everyone else? If this message resonates with your soul, share your experience in the comments so others know they're not alone. If you're ready to start honoring your own emotions and boundaries, type "I choose me" below, and let's walk this healing path together. 2. Suppressed emotions form the empath's shadow. Empaths are often praised for their kindness, compassion, and emotional sensitivity. But beneath that gentle surface lies a hidden storm that few ever notice until it erupts. From a young age, many empaths learn that in order to be loved or accepted, they must be agreeable, accommodating, and endlessly selfless. So they begin to suppress what they believe will make others uncomfortable: anger, resentment, pride, even the natural desire to say no. In trying to embody the role of the good soul, they exile parts of themselves to the unconscious, unaware that these disowned aspects are not gone, but quietly growing stronger in the shadows. According to Carl Jung, the shadow is the part of the psyche that holds everything we refuse to see in ourselves. And for the empath, this includes not just rage and frustration, but also the unmet need to be protected, seen, and heard. The more they deny these emotions, the more power they gain. Eventually, the empath becomes a stranger to their own soul, smiling on the outside while drowning in invisible exhaustion on the inside. You might notice this process in someone close to you, or even in yourself. There's that friend who always listened, always gave, always stayed silent in conflict, until one day they snapped. No warning, no explanation, just an emotional shutdown or a sudden eruption. It wasn't that they changed overnight. It was that the mask could no longer hold back the truth. This is the empath's breaking point, but it's not destruction. It's revelation. Carl Jung reminded us that you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. And when the empath finally breaks, they are choosing to become whole again. What looks like selfishness is really self-rescue. What seems like coldness is often clarity, and what some label as too much is simply a soul reclaiming its rightful space. The empath begins to draw boundaries not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. They stop fixing everyone else's chaos because they finally realize their energy was never meant to be an emotional sponge for the world. As the shadow rises, it doesn't make them darker. It makes them honest. They no longer carry guilt for being unavailable to people who only love them for their compliance. They stop apologizing for needing space, for saying no, for not being the healer on demand. This is the moment when the empath stops leaking energy and starts preserving it. They learn that the light they've always radiated must also shine inward. Carl Jung believed the path to wholeness requires integrating the shadow, and that's exactly what this process is: a reunion with the abandoned self. It's painful, yes, but it's also sacred. Because when the empath finally allows their truth to surface, they don't lose their empathy, they refine it. It becomes rooted, clear, and powerful. No longer used as a tool for self-erasure, empathy becomes an expression of choice, not obligation. And in this new embodiment, the empath doesn't just survive, they thrive, because they've stopped betraying themselves to be understood. They've remembered that being spiritual is not about being endlessly soft. It's about being soul-aligned, even when that means being fierce. 3. The snapping is a necessary eruption, not a breakdown. The snapping is not a collapse. It is the moment the soul rises through the cracks. When an empath finally breaks, it's not because they've failed. It's because they've spent a lifetime absorbing the pain of others, silencing their own voice, and performing peace at the cost of their own emotional truth. What looks like an explosion is really an awakening. For years, the empath has been cast in the role of caretaker, healer, the one who always understands, but understanding everyone else while ignoring your own inner storm is not compassion. It is self-abandonment in disguise. As Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The empath's unconscious is a pressure cooker filled with denied anger, repressed boundaries, and unmet needs. And eventually, the soul refuses to play dead. The snapping is the sacred revolt of a spirit that has outgrown its cage. It is not an act of destruction, but one of reclamation, reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried just to be loved, accepted, or safe. This spiritual rupture marks the moment when you stop pretending to be light without shadow, good without rage, kind without limits. You begin to see that your healing cannot be dependent on how well you serve others while ignoring your own needs. What society calls a breakdown is actually your truth finally breaking through the mask. You begin to choose honesty over harmony, boundaries over people-pleasing, solitude over toxic familiarity. You start to grieve the years you lived as half a soul, and something in you whispers, "No more." Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The empath, when they snap, is finally making that darkness conscious, not to become bitter, but to become whole. You stop leaking energy into situations that drain you. You stop being the emotional sponge and become the mirror. You no longer let guilt, fear of abandonment, or the illusion of duty dictate your choices. This isn't numbness, it's clarity. You are not reacting because you've grown beyond the chaos. Your soul no longer vibrates at that frequency. In this moment, you're no longer just surviving. You're remembering who you were before the world taught you to edit yourself for acceptance. The snapping is your sacred revolt against spiritual bypassing, against the idea that you must be endlessly soft to be spiritually evolved. You are soft, yes, but you are also steel. You are finally integrating your sacred no with your compassionate yes. The empath doesn't snap because they're weak. They snap because for the first time, they're strong enough to stop bleeding for everyone else and start breathing for themselves. This is not the fall. This is the rise. If you're ready to honor your sacred breakthrough and reclaim your full self, don't hesitate to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's rise together from the snap, not as broken, but as whole. 4. The empath's behavior was shaped by early conditioning. Most empaths were not raised to honor their own emotions. They were raised to manage everyone else's. In childhood, they learned that love was conditional and often came with a price: their silence, their compliance, their emotional invisibility. They were rewarded for being easy, for being good, for putting others first, and they were punished through shame, withdrawal, or disapproval for expressing anything messy, like anger, grief, or frustration. This early conditioning trained them to split their soul in two: the socially acceptable version that smiles and serves, and the hidden shadow that holds every unspoken truth. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this is exactly what happens to the empath. Their unconscious shadow, formed by years of emotional self-abandonment, quietly begins to run the show. While the world sees someone kind, gentle, and endlessly giving, inside the empath is a pressure building, a storm gathering strength in silence. They've been absorbing the emotions of others for so long that they've forgotten what their own soul sounds like. They've become a mirror for others' wounds while neglecting their own. And eventually, that mirror shatters not out of cruelty, but from sheer exhaustion. The breaking point isn't dramatic, it's spiritual. It's the moment their soul refuses to be silenced any longer. What looks like sudden anger or withdrawal is actually a sacred eruption of truth. The empath begins to reclaim everything they buried: the rage that was never safe, the sadness that had no room, the voice that was always told to be quieter. This process is messy, misunderstood, and often judged by the very people who benefited from the empath's silence. But this is when real healing begins. The empath who breaks is not falling apart. They are finally falling into themselves. They stop apologizing for their truth. They stop shrinking for the comfort of others. They stop earning love by sacrificing their authenticity. Their kindness no longer comes from fear or guilt. It comes from clarity, from knowing that loving others never required the abandonment of self. As the soul reintegrates, they discover that boundaries are not rejection, they are protection. That saying no is not cruelty, it is self-respect. That they were never too much. The room was simply too small. This return to the self is not a betrayal of their nature. It is the highest act of spiritual alignment. Because true empathy is not about disappearing into others, it's about being fully present with your own soul, so that when you choose to give, it is from overflow, not depletion. And that is when the empath becomes powerful, not because they've hardened, but because they've awakened. Not because they've stopped caring, but because they've remembered that their own soul matters too. 5. Dreams, breakdowns, and triggers awaken the unconscious. When an empath dreams vividly, breaks down without warning, or finds themselves deeply triggered by seemingly insignificant moments, it is not random. It is a sacred message from the unconscious. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious reveals itself through symbols, dreams, and emotional upheaval. And for the empath, these signs are not just spiritual whispers, but urgent calls for transformation. These intense emotional experiences are not signs of weakness or instability. They are signals that deep inner wounds and unmet needs have reached a boiling point. For empaths, who often live in constant resonance with the emotions of others, it's easy to lose track of their own emotional truth. They may spend years sacrificing themselves for peace, for harmony, for love. But the unconscious does not forget. It stores every unspoken boundary, every suppressed feeling, every self-betrayal. And when the soul can no longer carry the weight, it sends a message that cannot be ignored. A woman who has spent her entire life being the emotional caregiver, the mediator, the fixer, she may suddenly find herself weeping uncontrollably after a minor disagreement at work. But the tears are not about the argument. They are about the years of being unheard, unseen, and unacknowledged. The trigger is just the surface. The real eruption is coming from her soul, from a part of her that has long been silenced. Carl Jung emphasized that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And for the empath, this means that ignoring emotional wounds will only lead to repeated patterns of pain. These breakdowns are not breakdowns at all. They are breakthroughs. They are not failures, but the moment the soul decides to be honest. Dreams become louder, more symbolic. Triggers become more frequent. Emotional storms become unavoidable. And this is not a descent into madness. It is the beginning of a return to the self. The shadow, as Jung explained, is everything we have refused to acknowledge in ourselves. For the empath, the shadow may be the rage they've been taught to hide, the selfishness they were told was shameful, or the boundaries they were conditioned to feel guilty for asserting. When the unconscious finally forces a confrontation with the shadow, it is not an attack, it is a rescue mission. The soul no longer wants to live in fragments. It wants wholeness. It wants the truth. And it will fight for it through dreams, through pain, through disruption. The lesson is this: your emotional intensity is not a curse, it is a compass. Your breakdowns are not setbacks, they are revelations. Your triggers are not weaknesses. They are mirrors showing you where your healing still lies. When you begin to treat your inner landscape as sacred, as Carl Jung did, you realize that the unconscious is not your enemy. It is your greatest guide. Everything that has shaken you is leading you back to yourself. Everything that has broken you is pointing you toward a deeper spiritual integration. And when you answer the call of the unconscious, not with fear, but with reverence, you begin the real journey not to become someone new, but to finally remember who you've always been. If you've ever felt like your dreams or breakdowns were trying to tell you something deeper, you're not alone. These moments are sacred messages from the unconscious, guiding your healing. If this resonates with you, type in the comments, "I welcome the messages of my soul." And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to support others on their path of awakening. 6. Integration is the true healing, not avoidance or indulgence. True spiritual healing is not about escaping your shadow or drowning in it. It's about integration, the sacred act of welcoming every fragmented part of yourself home. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, who is often praised for their softness and light, this journey isn't easy. You've likely spent years absorbing other people's emotions, mistaking passivity for peace, and silencing your own rage to preserve harmony. But real healing demands that you stop abandoning yourself in the name of compassion. It requires you to finally turn toward your shadow and say, "I see you, I hear you, and I will no longer pretend you don't exist." Because your power has never lived in how good you are at suppressing your truth. It lives in how honestly you can hold all of it. Integration means knowing you are kind and capable of fury, gentle and unshakable, nurturing and sovereign. And it is from this place of wholeness that clarity is born. You no longer react unconsciously or overgive in the name of love. Instead, you respond from awareness, choosing who you will be without guilt or apology. This is not weakness. It is maturity. It is what makes you spiritually unshakable, emotionally boundaried, and soulfully grounded. You begin to see that your shadow is not a flaw, but a teacher, offering wisdom from the places you've ignored. You realize that your triggers are not signs of failure, but invitations to integrate the pain that once defined you. And when you stop running from your edges, you start to expand. No longer ruled by guilt, people-pleasing, or fear of rejection, you reclaim the sacred space of your own center. You stop seeking validation from those who misunderstand your depth and start embodying the quiet, undeniable power of someone who knows who they are. You don't need to scream your boundaries, they are felt. You don't need to prove your worth, it radiates. And in this evolution, you stop being just the empath who saves everyone else. You become the soul who has saved herself. Integration is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong spiritual discipline. You will revisit your shadows. You will stumble. But each time you choose consciousness over avoidance, truth over comfort, you reclaim more of yourself. So don't be afraid of your fire. Don't mistake emotional neutrality for numbness. What you're feeling now is not the loss of your light. It's the beginning of your fullness. You're not falling apart. You're breaking open. And in that opening lies a kind of beauty no illusion of perfection could ever touch. 7. They become sovereign and not reactive. They become sovereign, not reactive. That single truth marks the sacred turning point in an empath's journey. The moment when the soul no longer bows to the emotional storms of others, but stands rooted in its own truth. If you've ever felt like you were drowning in the needs, projections, and chaos of those around you, know this. The breaking point wasn't your end. It was the soul's demand for liberation. As Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the hidden shadow. No one talks about the silent transformation when the empath evolves from a sponge to a mirror. The healed empath does not absorb anymore. They reflect. They see without reacting, feel without collapsing, and love without abandoning themselves. This shift is not a hardening of the heart, but a refinement of the spirit. It's what happens when a soul decides that peace is no longer negotiable, and that empathy is not an invitation to be used. You see, for most of their life, the empath equates love with rescue, boundaries with rejection, and stillness with guilt. But once the healing begins, the soul rewrites these unconscious codes. The healed empath says no, not with fear, but with wisdom. There is no trembling in their voice, no need to over-explain. That no becomes an act of spiritual alignment, a way to honor their inner compass. They no longer offer their energy as a bottomless well. Instead, they become selective, intentional, and anchored. They ask, "Does this serve my soul? Is this my burden to carry?" They become guardians of their own life force, no longer available for roles that require them to shrink, silence their truth, or betray their needs for someone else's comfort. What's most remarkable is how the healed empath's presence changes. They become still, yet powerful, silent, yet deeply heard. Their grounded energy becomes a mirror that disrupts other people's unconscious patterns. And this makes some uncomfortable, not because the empath has changed in a harmful way, but because others can no longer manipulate or access them through guilt, chaos, or fear. The healed empath doesn't react to emotional bait. They pause. They observe. They respond from soul, not survival. This spiritual sovereignty creates space for real transformation, not just for the empath, but for everyone around them. When you no longer feed dysfunction with your attention, it starves. So if you've ever been told that you're too sensitive, too emotional, or too much, understand this. Your sensitivity was never the problem. It was your untrained energy that made you vulnerable. But now, you've trained it. You've harnessed your intuition, reclaimed your boundaries, and remembered that your soul was not born to be an emotional landfill. It was born to radiate presence, discernment, and divine clarity. And this, dear listener, is the hidden shadow that becomes your light, the very breakdown that birthed your spiritual breakthrough. The healed empath doesn't just survive chaos. They outgrow it, transmute it, and become the calm in the storm. Because their soul finally remembered what it was always meant to be: sovereign, sacred, and free. Step into your sovereignty with us by subscribing to our channel. Here, we honor the journey of healed empaths, those who set boundaries with grace and live from inner wisdom. Join our community where grounded energy, self-respect, and spiritual growth are celebrated. You are no longer reactive. You are rooted. 8. True power comes from wholeness. True power doesn't come from always being kind, agreeable, or endlessly available. It comes from becoming whole. Carl Jung taught us that individuation is the process of embracing both the light and the shadow. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the journey of an empath. Empaths often begin life as deeply sensitive souls, tuned into everyone else's emotions, needs, and energies, but disconnected from their own. They are praised for their compassion, yet punished when they draw boundaries. They try to be the peacekeepers, the healers, the ones who absorb the room's chaos just to make it bearable for everyone else. But over time, something cracks. The constant suppression of their needs, the avoidance of conflict, and the self-abandonment eventually lead to what can only be described as a spiritual rupture. This is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Let me tell you a story that may sound familiar. There's a woman in her 40s named Sarah. For years, she played the role of the good daughter, the understanding wife, the loyal friend. She said yes when she meant no. She forgave betrayal after betrayal. She gave everything and asked for nothing. But one day, after a heated conversation with a colleague who had overstepped one too many times, she didn't smile. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain herself. She walked away, not out of rage, but out of clarity. In that moment, Sarah didn't just reclaim her time. She reclaimed her soul. That quiet exit wasn't a weakness. It was power. It was the moment she stopped being the emotional sponge and became the mirror. The moment she realized she wasn't here to carry everyone's pain, but to honor her own. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is exactly what happens to empaths who haven't integrated their shadow. They think they're being kind, but they're actually being controlled by unconscious fears. The fear of rejection, the fear of conflict, the fear of not being enough. But when the empath breaks, when they finally stop betraying themselves to keep the peace, they don't become cold or heartless. They become integrated. They become real. They become someone who can love without losing themselves. This transformation doesn't mean they stop feeling. It means they stop leaking energy into chaos that was never theirs to begin with. And that's the hidden shadow no one talks about. That many empaths are driven by wounds, not wisdom. By healing these wounds and reclaiming their voice, their time, and their truth, they no longer try to rescue or fix everyone else. Instead, they embody a higher form of love, one that includes themselves. This isn't about revenge or shutting down emotionally. It's about becoming whole, which, as Carl Jung emphasized, is the real path to power. So here's what I want you to take away from this. If you are an empath, your soul is not here just to feel deeply. It's here to awaken fully. Stop apologizing for your clarity. Stop shrinking for other people's comfort. Start honoring the sacred no as much as the compassionate yes. Because your spiritual journey isn't just about healing others. It's about becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves in the name of love. And that, right there, is your true power. 9. The transformation is spiritual and archetypal. The transformation the empath undergoes is not just emotional, it is deeply spiritual, rooted in archetypal truth and soul memory. When the empath breaks, it is not a collapse of weakness, but a sacred unraveling. It mirrors the myth of Inanna, the goddess who descended into the underworld, shedding her garments at each gate until she stood bare before her shadow. In the same way, the empath must confront every mask they've worn to survive every smile that hid the pain, every yes that betrayed their boundaries, every silence that protected others but abandoned themselves. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and it is through this pain that the empath begins to awaken, not to more suffering, but to sovereignty." They begin to remember that being spiritual is not about being soft or endlessly forgiving. It's about reclaiming their soul from every place it was lost. For years, empaths are praised for their light, how much they feel, how deeply they care, but no one sees the cost of that gift. No one talks about how spiritual trauma forms when an empath constantly absorbs the chaos of others while denying their own truth. Eventually, the soul can no longer bear the misalignment, and so it snaps not to destroy itself, but to escape the false peace that was built on self-abandonment. This sacred snapping is the gateway to integration. The empath begins to feel their own anger, their own sadness, their own unmet needs rising to the surface, not to shame them, but to remind them that they are whole, and not just a mirror for other people's wounds. Carl Jung taught, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is exactly what happens. The empath, once devoted to being a healer, now becomes the mystic, not by avoiding the shadow, but by embodying it with awareness. In this rebirth, the empath stops being the emotional sponge and becomes the mirror. They no longer react to projection. They reflect it. They no longer chase closure. They create space. And they no longer fear being misunderstood because truth no longer needs validation. Their spiritual growth is no longer measured by how much they can endure, but by how deeply they can remain anchored in their essence. It is not a retreat from love, but a return to self-respect. It is not isolation, but discernment. It is not bitterness, but clarity. This journey, from fragmentation to fullness, from suppression to sovereignty, from wounding to awakening, is not a step away from spirituality. It is spirituality in its rawest, most authentic form. Are you ready to embrace your spiritual transformation and rise like the mystic you were born to be? If so, comment below. I embrace both shadow and light to declare your commitment to this powerful journey of awakening. 10. The healed empath radiates clarity, not chaos. The healed empath no longer walks into rooms wondering who they need to become to be accepted. They walk in already rooted in who they are, no longer absorbing everyone's chaos. They now emanate clarity so strong it subtly tunes the environment around them. They're not trying to fix anyone anymore because they've learned that healing doesn't happen through control, but through sacred witnessing. Their presence alone becomes a safe space, not because they sacrifice themselves, but because they've reclaimed themselves. Where they once needed to be liked or needed to feel worthy, now they embody a love that flows from fullness, not emotional starvation. Their soul is no longer bargaining for scraps of connection. It is sovereign, whole, and magnetic in its stillness. Once, their identity was tangled in the pain of others, as if their value was measured by how much weight they could carry. But now, they refuse to be the emotional mule. As Carl Jung warned, you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. And this choice to no longer internalize other people's projections marks a radical turning point in the empath's spiritual evolution. They don't need to explain themselves or shrink to make others comfortable. Their silence is no longer suppression, it's sovereignty. Their stillness is no longer avoidance, it's alignment. And the beauty of this transformation is that they no longer pour themselves into bottomless cups. They pour into those who hold their own cups with care, with presence, with mutual respect. Their energy is no longer available to be siphoned through guilt, obligation, or unspoken contracts rooted in fear. Now, they love differently, not through desperation or performance, but with reverence and discernment. They can sit with another's pain without absorbing it, listen without losing themselves, and hold space without dissolving into it. Their soul has developed the spiritual muscle to stay grounded in storms and graceful in chaos. They are no longer emotionally reactive because they've done the inner work to become emotionally sovereign. Their love is no longer a cry for connection, it's a song of truth. And in their presence, others are confronted not with judgment, but with the mirror of their own potential. This is the hidden shadow no one talks about, that the empath's power was never in their softness alone, but in their soul's ability to alchemize pain into presence and chaos into calm. To affirm your growth into wholeness, declare it with intention. Comment below, I radiate clarity to honor your healing journey and inspire others to rise from chaos into calm presence. Thank you for joining us on this deep exploration into the hidden shadow of the empath, an emotional truth many feel but few can name. If this message resonated with you or sparked new insight, let it be a reminder that your sensitivity is not a weakness, but a sacred compass. There is power in your breaking point, and even greater power in how you choose to rebuild. To continue growing with us on this journey of spiritual wisdom and transformation, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next soul-stirring insight. Your healing is not just personal, it's collective.